The emergency alarm shattered the peaceful Tuesday afternoon at Anderson Pharmaceuticals, sending Sarah Mitchell racing down the sterile white hallways toward the research wing, where smoke billowed from under a laboratory door. She grabbed the fire extinguisher without thinking, her heart hammering against her ribs as she burst through the entrance. Inside, flames licked at a toppled chemical container while her colleague David stumbled backward, clutching his burned hand. Sarah aimed the extinguisher and unleashed a torrent of white foam, her arms shaking from adrenaline rather than fear. Within seconds, she had the situation under control. "Get to medical," she ordered David, her voice steady despite the chaos. "Now." As he rushed past her, she heard heavy footsteps behind her. Turning, she found herself face to face with James Turner, the company's 32-year-old CEO who had taken the helm 3 years ago after his father's retirement. His dark hair was slightly disheveled, his blue eyes intense as they swept across the damaged lab, then landed on her. "Everyone out," he commanded, his deep voice carrying authority that made people instinctively obey. "This floor needs to be evacuated until we verify there's no chemical contamination." Sarah nodded, setting down the extinguisher. Her hands were covered in foam residue, and she could feel her pulse slowly returning to normal. She had been working at Anderson Pharmaceuticals for 18 months as a junior research coordinator, managing clinical trial data and supporting the lead scientists. In all that time, she had maybe exchanged 3 sentences with James Turner. He was always in meetings with investors or locked away in the executive suite on the top floor. The evacuation took 20 minutes. Sarah found herself standing in the parking lot with 24 other employees, watching as the fire department conducted their inspection. She pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders, the November wind biting through the thin fabric. That was incredibly stupid. She turned to find James standing beside her, his suit jacket draped over one arm. His white shirt was pristine despite the emergency, making her acutely aware of the chemical stains on her own blouse. "Excuse me," Sarah bristled at his tone. "Running into a burning lab without backup, without safety equipment." His jaw was tight. "You could have been seriously injured." "Someone had to do something," she shot back. "David was in there. And now I would have had 2 injured employees instead of 1. He turned to face her fully, and she noticed a small scar above his left eyebrow that somehow made him look more human, less like the polished executive she'd seen in company newsletters. "What's your name?" "Sarah Mitchell, Junior Research Coordinator." "Well, Miss Mitchell, bravery and recklessness aren't the same thing." He paused, then added more quietly, "But thank you for helping David. That took courage." Before she could respond, his assistant appeared at his elbow, whispering urgently about the fire marshal's preliminary report. James nodded, already walking away, his phone pressed to his ear as he dealt with the crisis with practiced efficiency. Sarah watched him go, feeling strangely disappointed by the abrupt end to their conversation. She shook her head at herself. James Turner was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar pharmaceutical company. She was just one of hundreds of employees he probably couldn't pick out of a lineup before today. Except she was wrong about that. 3 days later, Sarah was summoned to the executive floor. Her stomach twisted with anxiety as she rode the elevator up, convinced she was about to be reprimanded for her actions during the fire. Maybe corporate had decided she'd violated some safety protocol. Maybe they were going to let her go. The executive suite was all glass and chrome, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. James's assistant, a efficient woman named Patricia, led Sarah through the maze of offices to a corner room where James sat behind a massive desk, reviewing documents. "Miss Mitchell," he said, standing as she entered. "Please sit down." Sarah perched on the edge of the leather chair across from him, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "If this is about the fire, I can explain. I asked you here because I wanted to discuss your future with the company." He set down his pen, giving her his full attention. "I've been reviewing your personnel file. You graduated top of your class with a degree in biochemistry. You've been consistently rated as an excellent employee. And your supervisor says you have an exceptional eye for detail and data analysis." She blinked, caught off guard. "Thank you. Why are you working as a junior coordinator? You're overqualified for that position." The question was direct, almost challenging. Sarah felt her defenses rise. "Because that's what was available when I needed a job. My father had just been diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's, and I needed steady income and good health insurance. Anderson Pharmaceuticals offered both." Something shifted in James's expression. "How is your father doing?" "He's stable, thank you for asking." She wasn't used to discussing personal matters at work, especially not with the CEO. "Why am I really here, Mr. Turner?" "Because I'm creating a new position, and I think you'd be perfect for it." He pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. "Director of Clinical Operations. You'd oversee all our ongoing trials, coordinate with research teams, and report directly to me. It's a significant promotion with a substantial salary increase." Sarah's mouth went dry. She opened the folder, her eyes widening at the compensation package. This was more than double her current salary. "I don't understand. Why me?" "Because in a crisis you acted. You didn't freeze, you didn't wait for someone else to take charge. You saw a problem and you solved it." James leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady on hers. "That's the kind of person I need on my senior team. Someone who can think on their feet and isn't afraid to take calculated risks." "This is a lot to process," Sarah admitted, her mind racing. "Take the weekend to think about it. Let me know Monday." He stood, signaling the end of the meeting, but as she reached the door, he added, "Sarah, your father is lucky to have someone like you looking out for him." She turned back, surprised by the gentleness in his voice. "Thank you, Mr. Turner." "James," he corrected. "If you take this position, we'll be working closely together. James is fine." That weekend, Sarah talked it over with her younger sister Emma, who was finishing her master's degree in social work. They sat in their father's small house, keeping him company while he worked on a jigsaw puzzle. His condition meant he had good days and bad days. Today was a good day, which made Sarah's heart ache even more, knowing how precious these moments were. "You have to take it," Emma insisted, pouring them both tea. "This is exactly the kind of opportunity you've been hoping for." "It feels too good to be true," Sarah said. "What if I can't handle it?" "What if you can?" Emma countered. "Sarah, you've been taking care of everyone else for so long. Dad, me, your job. Maybe it's time to let something good happen for you." Their father looked up from his puzzle, his eyes clear for the moment. "Your mother would have told you to be brave, sweetheart. Don't let fear hold you back." On Monday morning, Sarah walked into James's office and accepted the position. The next 3 months were a whirlwind. Sarah threw herself into her new role with determination, working late nights to master the complexities of managing multiple clinical trials across different therapeutic areas. James was demanding but fair, expecting excellence, but providing the resources she needed to succeed. They developed a working rhythm that surprised her with its ease. He had a sharp mind that could cut through complex problems with startling clarity. And he listened when she spoke, really listened, treating her insights with respect. They began meeting every morning to review trial data and discuss strategy. Those meetings gradually extended from 30 minutes to an hour, then longer, as their conversations drifted from pure business to broader topics. Sarah learned that James had taken over Anderson Pharmaceuticals reluctantly, having initially planned to pursue medicine himself before his father's heart attack forced him to step into the family business. He'd built the company into what it was today through brutal work ethic and genuine passion for the mission of developing treatments that changed lives. "You ever regret it?" Sarah asked one evening in late February. They were alone in his office, reviewing quarterly results. Outside the windows, the city lights sparkled against the dark sky. Not becoming a doctor, James was quiet for a moment, swirling the coffee in his mug. "Sometimes. But then I look at what we've accomplished. We've brought 12 new drugs to market in 5 years. Medications that treat everything from rare pediatric cancers to Alzheimer's." He glanced at her. "We're making a difference, even if it's not the way I originally envisioned." "My father is on one of your medications," Sarah said softly. "The trial drug for Alzheimer's patients." "It's helping slow the progression." James's eyes widened. "I didn't know that. It's giving us more time with him, more good days." She smiled, feeling the familiar ache in her chest. "So thank you for not becoming a doctor. Thank you for being here instead." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Sarah couldn't quite name. Then James cleared his throat and returned his attention to the reports, but she noticed his hand trembled slightly as he turned the page. As winter melted into spring, Sarah became aware of a growing problem. She was developing feelings for James Turner that went far beyond professional respect. It started small, noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, looking forward to their morning meetings with an eagerness that had nothing to do with work, feeling a flutter in her stomach when his hand accidentally brushed hers reaching for the same document. She tried to suppress it. This was the worst possible situation. Anderson Pharmaceuticals had a strict non-fraternization policy, especially between supervisors and their direct reports. James was her boss, her CEO. Getting involved with him could destroy everything she'd worked for, but the heart doesn't follow logic. One April afternoon, James asked her to accompany him to a pharmaceutical conference in Boston. It was a legitimate business trip. They'd be attending panels and networking with industry leaders. But Sarah's pulse raced at the thought of 3 days in close quarters with him. "Patricia usually handles these conferences," she said carefully. "Patricia is dealing with a family emergency, and frankly, I'd rather have you there. You understand the clinical side better than anyone." James looked up from his computer. "Is that a problem?" What could she say? That being alone with him made her heart race. That she dreamed about him more nights than she cared to admit. No problem at all. Boston was beautiful in spring, the city alive with cherry blossoms and the energy of academia. Their hotel was downtown, a historic building with elegant rooms and a rooftop bar that overlooked the Commons. Anderson Pharmaceuticals had booked them separate rooms on different floors, everything carefully appropriate. The first day of the conference was exhausting but productive. They attended panels on breakthrough therapies and FDA approval processes, networked with researchers and investors, and barely had time to eat. By the time they returned to the hotel that evening, Sarah's feet ached in her heels and her mind buzzed with information overload. "Drink," James suggested as they crossed the lobby. He looked as tired as she felt, his tie loosened and his jacket slung over one arm. They should both go to their separate rooms. Sarah knew this. Instead, she heard herself say, "Sure." The rooftop bar was quiet on a Tuesday night. They found a corner table away from the handful of other patrons and ordered drinks. Below them, the city lights twinkled in the gathering dusk. "You did well today," James said, nursing his whiskey. "That investor from Merck was impressed with your knowledge of our oncology trials." "I just answered his questions honestly." Sarah sipped her wine, feeling the tension of the day slowly unwind from her shoulders. You did more than that. You made him believe in what we're doing. James studied her across the table. You have a gift for making complex science accessible. It's rare. The compliment warmed her more than the wine. You're not so bad yourself. I watched you convince that venture capital firm to fund the pediatric research division. That's just business. No, it's passion. You care about the work and people can feel that. Sarah met his eyes. It's one of the things I admire most about you. The words hung in the air between them. James set down his glass carefully, and Sarah saw something flicker across his face, and emotion quickly shuddered. Sarah, he said, his voice low, we should talk about something. Her heart hammered. Okay. These past few months working with you, He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. This isn't appropriate. You work for me. There's a policy. I know, she whispered, but I can't stop thinking about you. The confession came out rough, almost pained. I look forward to seeing you every morning more than I should. When you smile at something, my whole day gets better. And right now, sitting here with you, all I can think about is how much I want to kiss you. Sarah's breath caught. She should say this was impossible, that they couldn't cross this line. Instead, she found herself saying, I think about you constantly. I tell myself it's wrong, that I'm being foolish, but then you walk into a room and nothing else matters. James reached across the table, his fingers intertwining with hers. His touch sent electricity up her arm. What are we going to do about this? I don't know. Sarah's voice shook. The policy exists for good reasons. Power dynamics, accusations of favoritism, the potential for harassment claims. All valid concerns. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. But this doesn't feel wrong. Does it feel wrong to you? No, she admitted. It feels like the most right thing in the world, and that terrifies me. They sat there for a long moment, hands linked, the weight of their admission settling between them. Finally, James said, Let's think about this. Really think about it. When we get back to the office, if we both still feel the same way, we'll figure out how to handle it properly. We'll talk to HR, we'll adjust the reporting structure if needed. But we do this right, Sarah. I won't risk your career or your reputation. The fact that his first thought was protecting her made Sarah fall even harder. They finished their drinks and walked to the elevators, still holding hands. When they reached her floor, James brought her fingers to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. Good night, Sarah. She barely slept that night. The next 2 days of the conference passed in a blur of heightened awareness. Every time James spoke, Sarah found herself captivated. Every accidental touch felt monumental. They maintained perfect professionalism in public, but in private moments, stolen glances and soft smiles revealed the truth neither could deny. On the flight home, James leaned close and murmured, I've thought about what we discussed. My answer hasn't changed. Neither has mine, Sarah whispered back. The following Monday, they met with the head of human resources together. Margaret Chen was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who had seen every workplace drama imaginable. She listened to their carefully worded explanation without expression. You're aware of the non-fraternization policy, Margaret said. We are, James confirmed, which is why we're here. We want to handle this correctly. Margaret steepled her fingers. The policy exists primarily to prevent abuse of power and conflicts of interest. James, as CEO, you have ultimate authority over every employee, which complicates matters. However, the policy does allow for consensual relationships between employees at different levels, provided proper disclosures are made and steps are taken to mitigate conflicts. What kind of steps? Sarah asked. Sarah would need to report to someone other than James. We'd need to adjust her position so there's no direct supervisory relationship. Margaret looked between them. I have to ask, are you both certain about this? Workplace relationships are complicated enough without adding the CEO into the mix. James looked at Sarah, his expression serious. I've never been more certain of anything. Sarah's heart swelled. Yes, I'm certain. Then we'll make it work. Margaret actually smiled. For what it's worth, I've watched you two work together. If ever there were two people who could handle this professionally, it's you. But understand that there will be talk. There will be people who question whether Sarah earned her position on merit. She did, James said firmly. Her work speaks for itself. I know that. You know that. Make sure everyone else knows it too. Margaret pulled out paperwork. Let's start the formal process. Over the next week, the company restructured. Sarah's title changed to Vice President of Clinical Operations, and she began reporting to the Chief Scientific Officer instead of directly to James. It was a lateral move in terms of authority, but removed the direct line of supervision. The gossip started almost immediately. Sarah had anticipated it, but the reality was harder than she expected. Whispers followed her through the halls. Colleagues who had been friendly suddenly turned cool. Someone left a note on her desk implying she'd slept her way to the top. She found it after a long day and stared at the cruel words until they blurred. James found her there, still holding the note. He read it, his jaw clenching. Who did this? I don't know. Does it matter? Sarah crumpled the paper. They're saying what everyone's thinking. Then everyone is wrong. James pulled her to her feet, his hands gentle on her shoulders. You earned every bit of your position. You're brilliant at your job, and anyone who can't see that is an idiot. You have to say that. She paused. They hadn't actually defined what they were to each other yet. They'd been so focused on managing the professional logistics. I'm what? James asked softly. I don't know, Sarah admitted. What are we doing, James? He cupped her face in his hands, his blue eyes intense. I'm falling in love with you, that's what I'm doing, and I'm hoping you feel the same way. Sarah's breath caught. I do. I'm terrified and exhilarated and completely in love with you. James kissed her then, soft and tender, a promise of everything they could be together. When they finally pulled apart, Sarah rested her forehead against his. We can do this, James murmured. We'll prove them all wrong. And slowly they did. Sarah continued to excel at her work, delivering results that no one could question. She successfully navigated a major FDA audit, brought 2 trials in ahead of schedule, and published a paper on clinical data management that got industry recognition. The whispers didn't stop completely, but they quieted as her competence became undeniable. Her relationship with James deepened. They were careful at the office, maintaining professionalism, but outside of work, they built something real. James met her father and sister, spending Sunday afternoons at the house helping with puzzles and learning to navigate the complexities of Alzheimer's with patience and genuine care. Sarah met James's parents, who welcomed her warmly despite their initial surprise. I've never seen him like this, James's mother confided one evening over dinner. Happy, truly happy. Whatever you're doing, please keep doing it. Summer arrived with sweltering heat. Sarah and James took a long weekend at a beach house on Cape Cod, their first real vacation together. They walked along the shore at sunset, the waves lapping at their feet. I've been thinking, James said, his hand warm in hers, about the future. Sarah's heart quickened. What about it? Anderson Pharmaceuticals is strong enough now that I can step back from some day-to-day operations. I want to actually have a life outside of work. He stopped walking, turning to face her. I want that life to be with you, James. I know it's only been a few months. I know everyone will say we're moving too fast. He pulled a small box from his pocket, and Sarah's breath stopped entirely. But I've spent my entire adult life being cautious and measured, making the safe choice, following the rules. And then you came into my life and suddenly breaking the rules felt right. You feel right. He opened the box, revealing a simple diamond ring that caught the fading sunlight. Marry me, Sarah. Not today, not tomorrow, but someday. Say we have a future together. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she nodded. Yes, yes, absolutely yes. The ring slid onto her finger perfectly. James kissed her as the sun sank into the ocean, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. In that moment, Sarah felt utterly certain that every risk had been worth it, that some rules existed to be broken when something real was at stake. They didn't announce the engagement immediately. Sarah wanted to wait until they'd been together longer, until the office gossip had fully died down. James understood, content to wear his love for her in private for now. But life has a way of forcing your hand. In September, Sarah's father took a turn for the worse. The Alzheimer's progressed rapidly, and suddenly she was juggling hospital visits and difficult conversations with doctors about care options. James was there through all of it, holding her hand through the worst moments, helping make impossible decisions. "You don't have to be here," Sarah told him one night at the hospital, exhausted and emotional. "This isn't your burden." "Yes, it is," James said firmly, "because you're mine and what affects you affects me. That's what love means." When her father stabilized and moved into a specialized care facility, Sarah broke down in James's arms. "I feel like I'm failing him." "You're giving him the best possible care. That's not failure, that's love." James stroked her hair. "And you're not doing this alone. I'm here, Emma's here. Let us help carry this." At the care facility one Sunday, Sarah's father had one of his increasingly rare clear moments. He looked at James, really looked at him, and said, "You take care of my girl, son." "I will, sir," James promised. "Every day for the rest of my life." Her father smiled, then turned to Sarah. "Your mother would have liked him. Too serious, maybe, but good, strong. That's what you need." After he drifted back into confusion, Sarah sat in James's car and cried until she had no tears left. James just held her, not trying to fix anything, just being present. "Marry me," he said when she finally quieted. Sarah pulled back to look at him. "What? I know we said we'd wait, but life is short and uncertain. I don't want to waste any more time." James cupped her face. "Marry me. We'll do it quietly, just us and our families. Let's make this real." "People will talk," Sarah warned. "Let them talk. I don't care anymore." James kissed her softly. "Do you care?" Sarah thought about everything they'd been through. The whispers and the doubts, the policy violations and the restructured titles. She thought about how James had stood beside her through her father's illness, how he made her laugh even on the darkest days, how he believed in her when she doubted herself. "No," she said finally. "I don't care. Let's get married." They wed 6 weeks later in a small ceremony at a vineyard outside the city. Emma was Sarah's maid of honor, and James's best friend from college stood as his best man. Their parents cried, as parents do, and Sarah's father had enough clarity to walk her down the aisle, even if he wasn't entirely sure what was happening. At the reception, James pulled Sarah onto the dance floor. As they swayed to the music, he whispered in her ear, "No regrets." "Not even one," Sarah whispered back. My only regret is not kissing you in the rooftop bar in Boston," James grinned. "I should have broken the rules sooner." "We had to do things right," Sarah reminded him. "We did. And now you're my wife." He said the word with wonder, like he couldn't quite believe it. "Mrs. Turner." "I'm keeping Mitchell professionally," Sarah said. "Can't let anyone think I'm using your name to get ahead." James laughed. "Of course you are. That's one of the many reasons I love you." On Monday morning, they returned to work together. The ring on Sarah's finger was now accompanied by a wedding band, impossible to miss. When they arrived at the office, James pulled Sarah aside before they went their separate ways. "Ready?" he asked. "For whatever comes," Sarah confirmed. The reactions were mixed. Some colleagues offered genuine congratulations. Others were clearly skeptical. But as the weeks passed, and Sarah continued to excel at her work, earning her place through undeniable results, even the skeptics had to acknowledge that this was real. That she belonged there, ring or no ring. Margaret from HR pulled Sarah aside one day. "You know, when you two first came to me, I had my doubts. I've seen so many workplace relationships implode spectacularly." She smiled. "But you've both handled this with more grace and professionalism than I thought possible. You proved me wrong." "We just tried to do things right," Sarah said. "You did more than that. You showed that sometimes the rules aren't as important as the people behind them." Margaret patted her arm. "Congratulations on proving that love and professionalism aren't mutually exclusive." As fall turned to winter again, Sarah and James settled into married life. They bought a house with enough room for Emma to visit and for Sarah's father to stay on his good days. They hosted Thanksgiving dinner, their families blending together with surprising ease. On Christmas morning, Sarah woke to find James already awake, watching her with an expression of such tender devotion that it made her heart ache. "What?" she asked sleepily. "Just thinking about how a year ago I was alone, married to my work, convinced that was enough." He traced her jawline with his finger. "And then you ran into a burning lab and turned my entire world upside down." "I didn't do it for you," Sarah teased. "I know. You did it because someone needed help, and you've never been able to walk away from that." James kissed her forehead. "It's one of the 1,000 things I love about you." "Only 1,000. Sarah pulled him closer. "You're slipping, Mr. Turner." They spent Christmas Day in their pajamas, drinking hot chocolate and watching snow fall outside their windows. It was perfect in its simplicity. In January, Sarah got news that made her cry with joy. The Alzheimer's medication her father was on, developed by Anderson Pharmaceuticals, was being fast-tracked for full FDA approval. The trial results were exceptional, showing significant slowing of disease progression in early-stage patients. "You did this," she told James that night. "You made this possible." "We did this," he corrected. "Your work on the trial coordination was crucial to getting accurate data." But Sarah knew the truth. James had poured resources into Alzheimer's research long before he met her, driven by the belief that families deserved more time together. That his money and influence had literally bought her more good days with her father. "Thank you," she whispered, crying happy tears. "Thank you for everything." Spring came again, marking a full year since that conference in Boston where everything changed. Sarah had been promoted again, this time purely on merit, to senior vice president. She was leading a team of 50 and overseeing the company's entire clinical trial portfolio. At the one-year anniversary of their first kiss, James took Sarah back to Boston. They stayed at the same hotel, sat at the same rooftop bar. "Remember how terrified we were?" James asked, holding her hand across the table. "I remember thinking this was the biggest risk of my life," Sarah said. "I thought breaking the rules would destroy everything. And now I know that some rules exist to be challenged, that the right person is worth the risk." She squeezed his hand. "You were worth every bit of uncertainty." James pulled an envelope from his jacket. "I have something for you." Inside was a letter of recommendation, signed by James and every member of the executive team. "What is this?" "You've been talking about getting your MBA," James said. "This is for Harvard's executive program. If you get in, I've arranged for the company to cover tuition and will adjust your schedule so you can attend classes." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. James, this is too much. It's not enough. You deserve every opportunity to grow and succeed. He leaned forward. I never want you to feel like being with me limited your career. If anything, I want to help you achieve everything you're capable of. That fall, Sarah started her MBA program. It was challenging, balancing work and school and marriage, but she thrived on the challenge. James supported her through late-night study sessions and stressful exams, bringing her coffee and rubbing her shoulders when she got tense. 2 years into their marriage, on a quiet Sunday morning, Sarah made an announcement that changed everything. I'm pregnant. James dropped the spatula he'd been using to make pancakes. You're what? Pregnant. About 8 weeks. Sarah's hand rested on her still flat stomach. Are you happy? James crossed the kitchen in 2 strides and swept her into his arms. Happy, Sarah, I'm beyond happy. I'm ecstatic. He pulled back to look at her. Are you happy? Terrified and thrilled, she admitted, but mostly thrilled. They told their families that afternoon. Emma screamed with excitement. James's mother cried, and Sarah's father, in one of his brief clear moments, smiled and said, About time. That boy needs to keep up with you. The pregnancy was smooth, and Sarah worked up until 2 weeks before her due date, determined to finish her MBA before the baby arrived. She walked across the stage to receive her diploma, 8 months pregnant, James cheering louder than anyone in the audience. Their daughter, Elizabeth Rose Turner, arrived on a warm June morning. She had Sarah's dark hair and James's blue eyes, and from the moment the nurse placed her in Sarah's arms, everything else faded to background noise. She's perfect, James whispered, tears streaming down his face as he looked at his daughter. You're both perfect. Sarah took 6 months of maternity leave, which James had personally ensured was fully paid despite it exceeding company policy. When she returned to work, they'd converted one of the executive floor offices into a nursery so she could nurse Elizabeth during the day. It set a precedent that other working mothers in the company soon took advantage of. You're changing the culture here, Margaret from HR told Sarah. Making it more family-friendly. It's good for everyone. On Elizabeth's first birthday, the entire family gathered at their house. Sarah's father had declined significantly, but he was there, holding his granddaughter with Emma's help, a smile on his face even if he didn't fully understand what was happening. That night, after everyone had left and Elizabeth was asleep, Sarah and James sat on their back porch watching fireflies dance in the darkness. You ever think about how different things could have been? Sarah asked. If I hadn't accepted your job offer or if we decided the risk was too great, James pulled her close. All the time, and I'm grateful every single day that you were brave enough to take a chance on us. You were brave too, Sarah pointed out. You had more to lose. No, I had everything to gain. James kissed the top of her head. A real life, a family, love. Those things are worth any amount of risk. Sarah's father passed away peacefully that winter in his sleep at the care facility. It was a relief more than a tragedy, his suffering finally over. At the funeral, Sarah gave a eulogy that celebrated his life and his love, and she thanked him for teaching her to be brave. He told me once to never let fear hold me back, she said through her tears. That advice gave me the courage to take a job that seemed too good to be true. It gave me the courage to fall in love with someone I shouldn't have, and it gave me this beautiful life I have now. So thank you, Dad, for everything. James held her hand through the entire service, solid and steady as always. Life moved forward. Elizabeth grew into a bright, curious toddler. Sarah became executive vice president, the third highest-ranking person at Anderson Pharmaceuticals. She and James were featured in a business magazine article about successful workplace relationships and how to navigate them ethically. We just tried to be honest, Sarah told the interviewer. We didn't hide our relationship. We didn't pretend there weren't complications. We addressed them head-on and worked with HR to ensure everything was above board. Do you have advice for others in similar situations? The interviewer asked. Sarah glanced at James, who was sitting beside her. Make sure it's real. Don't risk your career for something casual. And if it is real, be prepared to work harder than you've ever worked to prove yourself. There will always be people who doubt you. Let your results speak louder than their whispers. The article went viral in business circles. Sarah received messages from dozens of people in workplace relationships, thanking her for being open about the challenges and proving it could work. On their 5th wedding anniversary, James surprised Sarah with a renewed vow ceremony. It was just the two of them, standing on the same beach where he'd first proposed, with Elizabeth playing in the sand nearby. 5 years ago, you said yes to me despite every logical reason to say no, James said, holding both her hands. You took a chance on us, on this chaotic, complicated love. These 5 years have been the best of my life. You've made me a better man, a better leader, a better father. So I'm standing here today to promise you 5,000 more days just as good. To promise that I'll never stop being grateful that you ran into that burning lab and into my life. Sarah was crying again, but they were happy tears. I promise to keep challenging you, supporting you, and loving you through whatever comes next. You were worth breaking the rules for, James Turner. You'll always be worth it. They kissed as the sun set, their daughter giggling in the background, and Sarah felt the overwhelming certainty that this was exactly where she was meant to be. 2 years later, Sarah was promoted to Chief Operating Officer of Anderson Pharmaceuticals. She was the first woman to hold that position in the company's 70-year history. On her first day with the new title, she found a note on her desk from James. I always knew you'd end up running this place. Just promise you won't fire me when you become CEO. Love, your proud husband. Sarah laughed and tucked the note into her desk drawer, next to the announcement of Elizabeth's birth and a photo from their wedding day. Reminders of all the rules she'd broken and all the love she'd found because of it. That evening, she came home to find James cooking dinner while Elizabeth helped by stirring a bowl of something that might have been cookie dough. The house smelled like garlic and happiness. Rough first day as COO, James asked, kissing her hello. Challenging but good, Sarah said, scooping Elizabeth into her arms. How was your day? We made cookies, Elizabeth announced proudly. I only dropped 2 eggs. Only 2, that's impressive. Sarah looked at James over their daughter's head, and the love in his eyes made her heart full to bursting. This was her life now. Complicated and messy and absolutely perfect. She'd broken every rule she'd thought mattered, and in return, she'd found everything that actually did. Years later, when Elizabeth was old enough to ask questions, she wanted to know how her parents met. Mommy saved someone from a fire, James said, pulling Sarah close on the couch. And then she saved me from a life without her. That's not how it happened, Sarah protested, laughing. Isn't it though? James kissed her temple. You walked into my life and changed everything. Some people would call that salvation. I call it breaking the rules, Sarah said. Best decision I ever made, they said in unison, then laughed at the synchronicity of it. Elizabeth wrinkled her nose. You guys are weird. We are, Sarah agreed, but we're happy. That's what matters, and they were, deliriously, completely, imperfectly happy. The kind of happiness that comes from taking risks, from choosing love over logic, from believing that sometimes the rules exist to be challenged by people brave enough to follow their hearts. Sarah had run into a burning building once, acting on instinct and courage. Falling in love with James had required the same bravery, the same willingness to face danger for something worth saving. The difference was that this time, the fire didn't go out. It burned steady and warm, lighting their way forward, year after year after year. Breaking the rules had never felt so right.